Today I'm going to cover everything you need to know about how to run this buffer and how to buff between coats. These are the most common attachments that you can use for a buffer. Here we have the buffer plate. This attaches to the buffer itself. Here we have the white pad. This attaches to the buffer plate and again attaches to the buffer. You can see the notches on the buffer plate fit perfectly with the buffer itself. So you're going to line up the notches in this with this and make sure it locks in place. These are your two most common buffing screens. You got a 220 mesh screen and a sand dollar. You're going to use the sand dollar for water-based finishes or floors that are already pretty smooth. And this is your 220 screen. You're typically going to use this on an oil-based finish or finishes that are pretty gritty. The floor we're working on today is oil-based, so we're going to use that 220 screen. So I'll throw my screen down and bring my buffer to meet it. And there you go. So once you have the buffer plugged in, you're going to move over to this lever here and put it in an unlocked position. Generally speaking, you're going to want to move the handle to around your hip area, and then you can go ahead and lock it. So this is where it can get a little tricky for people that aren't familiar with how to run a buffer. It can be a bit of a rodeo trying to control this thing. You really just kind of want to let it do its own thing and not fight it. Otherwise, it'll have a tendency to swing out from under you. Because the buffer is very powerful, it can have a tendency to get out of control and you might end up running into a wall. The way you can prevent this is by not putting any pressure in any other direction and just let it float. Another tip is to always keep it right in front of you. You don't want to be at a weird angle like this, as it can get out of control really fast. So the way you control this buffer is by pressing this dead man switch, and then you can go ahead and press the triggers and that'll get it started. Right now, we have a coat of sealer and a coat of oil-based finish on this floor. Now, we do have to buff before we put our final coat of oil-based finish on this so that the two layers can stick to each other. The second reason you want to buff is to get grit out of the first coat. With oil-based especially, it has a longer drying period and thus more opportunity for little particles of dust to get in the floor. Once you're ready to start buffing, you're going to want to start by buffing all of the edges of your given room, and then you can work in the field. The reason we do this is so that we don't miss buffing parts of the edge. All right, so now we can get started. When you run into vents on your edge, you're really going to want to make sure not to go over it. The vent holes can end up catching the paper and it'll throw the buffer around. So now that you're done with the edges, you can go ahead and start working in the field. You're going to go along with the grain in rows about the size of the buffer head. I'm going to go ahead and do this first row, and then I'll show you how much you should overlap. So you're going to want your overlap to be about half the row that you just buffed. Or another common thing that people do is they will count the amount of boards that they have there, and they'll split that in half. So the pace that you're going to walk at is about a regular walking pace, or maybe just a bit slower. This gives the screen enough time to get all of that grit out. One screen is typically going to last you a room about this size, which is around 250 square feet. To replace the screen, you're going to unlock this again, lift it up, and bring the buffer back. Then you can just take this off and replace it with a new one. So if you have bigger grit or a clump of something that ended up in the finish that didn't come out after buffing, you can go ahead and use a razor blade and just gently scrape it off. Beyond buffing the field, there's also edge buffing, which you would do with just your regular palm sander using 220 grit paper. You can do it by hand, just using this, rubbing around the edge, or you can go ahead and use your palm sander, which goes by a lot faster. If you have to buff stairs, you're also going to want to use the palm sander for that. It'll speed things up a lot. And we're going to do this the same way, working from the edges towards the center. After you're done buffing, you can go ahead and vacuum all this dust up and you're ready to start coating. Thank you guys for watching the video, and if you liked it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.